So in case you haven't heard, Studio Trigger's got this new film called PROMARE, which has premiered in the US at Anime Expo and Otakon, and I happened to see it at the latter convention. Now, if all you want to know is whether or not you should see this movie when it hits theaters on September 17th and 19th, dubbed and subbed respectively, the answer is yes, which you probably don't need to be told if you care enough about this unreleased movie to watch a video about it. Now, personally, when I watch even spoiler-free reviews of movies which I plan to see very soon, it tends to have a pronounced effect on my experience of the movie. Even if I end up disagreeing with everything the reviewer said, I'll be distracted thinking about how much I disagree with them while I'm watching the movie. So if that happens to you and you hate that, now would be a good time to turn back. If you don't really give a shit and you just want to hear as much of anyone who's seen the movie sharing their thoughts on it as possible, then continue. Overall, PROMARE is an enjoyable and entertaining movie, probably best experienced in a very hyped theater full of fanboys. Otakon was exactly that kind of setting, even if the crappy sound system, relatively small screen, and very uncomfortable chairs hampered the experience to an extent. Nevertheless, the film is practically edited around the expectation of noise from the crowd, with innumerable moments of characters just striking awesome poses and holding them for long enough for claps and cheers, and a constant propensity for high-impact visual moments and broad slapstick comedy. It's an extremely energetic movie, and I honestly can't imagine that it would have as much impact watching it alone or on a smaller screen. I'm definitely going to see it in theaters again because the Hiroyuki Sawano soundtrack is quite possibly the best part, and the Otakon sound system did not do it justice. 10 minutes into the movie, if you had asked me how I felt about it, I would have been stammering through comparisons to Mad Max Fury Road and Speed Racer and probably floating around the phrase like Redline but better, or at least even more to my tastes. For a while, the action just does not let up for a single second, and the choreography and animation is absolutely jaw-dropping. If you remember those long take fights on CGI backdrops from Panty and Stocking and Kill La Kill, those techniques have been completely mastered in the production of PROMARE, which, according to director Imaishi and producer Wakabayashi in the panel following the film, was their main focus in creating it. They wanted to take all of the unique animation techniques and styles developed over the course of Imaishi's work and bring them up to the pinnacle of execution. Without question, this was accomplished. If Dead Leaves represented the absolute height of what Imaishi's direction could do in 2D, PROMARE successfully expands that into the third dimension and shows me things I've never quite seen before. It's like everything from Panty and Stocking to now, even the fight scenes Imaishi directed for the Black Rock Shooter TV show, were all practice leading up to things like the insane minute-long single-take shot in the opening sequence, which deserves mention in the same breath as similar scenes from the Lego Movie or Into the Spider-Verse, while bringing Imaishi's very distinct momentum to the animation, which is what has always made him my favorite animator and director. All throughout the film, you'll find incredible animation and moments which pop and stick and will drive the crowd completely nuts, though I don't think any unbroken sequence throughout quite lives up to the beginning. In the typical fashion of anime films, PROMARE eventually rides into a ridiculously distended 45-minute final act of constant action, plot turns, random humor, and crazy poses, and there are no shortage of awesome moments in that climax, but the raw, relentless, charging fury of those first 10 minutes sadly never quite returns. Where PROMARE unfortunately suffers is all throughout its midsection, when I think nearly any viewer is going to come away wondering if this was originally intended to be a longer TV series, or is trying to leave itself open to one at least, or if the writing was majorly altered deep into production, or just why the hell the story would have been constructed in the particular way that it was. Our main character Gallo is the reincarnation of Kamina, and his teammates are never given a single ounce of development or really anything to do in the story. The pink-haired girl has some involvement in that she shows romantic interest towards Gallo early on, and her sister is working for the main bad guy in literally the same role as Kinon from Gurren Lagann, but otherwise basically disappears from the story after a point. The only character with any real motivations driving them through the plot is the rival, Leo, who kind of sort of has an arc, I guess, but mostly just was right all along and is the real good guy, with Gallo and him joining forces once both of them are fully aware of what's really going on. The plot is an intentional pastiche of elements of all of Imaishi and Trigger's past shows, and this works heavily to the film's detriment. There really is not a single original idea in the film's story or characters, and everything winds up feeling like a pale shadow of something that was iconic in its original incarnation. Even things which I could praise about the film, such as its theming, was already handled in other shows. At best, I would say that this film fixates more specifically on the theme of continuing to search for new solutions for mankind's salvation and refusing to resort to unethical treatment of living beings even when there isn't another solution currently in sight. But even then, it's just a slight refocusing of the themes present in Gurren Lagann and Kill La Kill. Moreover, the plot just lacks the tight construction of those shows, and not just because it's a lot shorter. The movie could have had stronger internal logic and more answers to the questions it raises, but just doesn't seem to care much about bothering to. To pin down what about this film sat with me incorrectly, it's the half-hearted approach it takes to postmodernism. On the one hand, it's winking and nodding at you constantly, insisting, as the director did before our screening, that you just don't think too hard about it and have a good time. Now, had this film been a purely aesthetic exercise that was entertaining from start to finish, as Imaishi's 50-minute favorite of mine, Dead Leaves, was, then I would have had no problem following this instruction. However, it's precisely because the film wears the pretense of a real dramatic plot and clear thematic messaging over top of that madness that it ends up feeling watered down. And drawing so many blatant parallels to all the past work just makes comparisons to those completely unavoidable in a way that was only ever going to hurt the product. PROMARE comes off, if anything, as overly safe, and maybe that's not surprising. A relatively new studio pouring 6 years of planning and pre-production into a massive technical showcase of a film based entirely on a cult-beloved director's particular visual style is an amazingly risky move in an industry where things like this just don't really happen anymore. Gurren Lagann has been an enduring and beloved franchise for over a decade, and with the rights to it being tied up in Gainax and Aniplex, Trigger isn't going to go back to it directly. But if they can make it as obvious as possible that this was meant to be some kind of spiritual successor to that, and the also beloved Kill La Kill while they're at it, then that would market the film in itself. And maybe the idea of marketing the film as a culmination of Imaishi's work up to that point would have seemed unique and cool to fans of him 6 years ago, but Trigger's reputation and body of work have shifted considerably in that time. During the panel, Imaishi noted how in the time that they were gathering up resources to produce PROMARE, they had to work on other minor projects in the meantime, such as Space Patrol Luluco. Problem is, they basically already did in Luluco what PROMARE was going to handle with less impact. That show made direct references to all of the director's work and incorporated those references into the story in hilarious and fun ways, so by the time you get to PROMARE, which doesn't even have as strong of characterization or as meaningful an ending as Luluco did, the impact is already diminished significantly. Moreover, in part because of that show, and in part because of Tatsun and Wakabayashi having made such an effort to cultivate the studio's intense cult following through constant con appearances, the Patreon, and even references to Western animation in shows like Little Witch Academia, Trigger has managed to become one of the best known studios in the business, with a lot of attention and discussion surrounding their work and hype for each subsequent project. In many ways, I think this has hurt the studio, with their callbacks to prior works constantly inviting unfavorable and often unnecessary comparisons between them. When PROMARE was announced with a main character bearing such obvious similarity to Kamina, the fan response was not entirely positive, and when you watch the movie and find his personality to be just a watered down version of the same without all the memorable dialogue, it's unshakable. It's just unfortunate that it feels like Trigger weren't confident enough to take a bigger risk in creating something more original with their first major film production. As a technical showcase, the film is absolutely incredible, and I will doubtlessly return to it many times just for the audio-visual splendor on display. But if not for a few scenes which just exceed anything Imaishi's done before on a technical level, I wouldn't have ever felt like I saw something in this that I couldn't find a better version of elsewhere, like I did watching every minute of Dead Leaves. I can imagine that if this movie had a unique story and characters which I loved, or even if it just had gone all in on the idea that none of it should be taken seriously at all and was just batshit insane from start to finish, then I'd probably be telling you right now that it's one of my favorite animated films. Instead, I feel much more lukewarm about it. Ultimately a positive experience, but one which I'd forgotten all but the best parts of by the next morning. For now, I would give it a 7 out of 10, but my opinion could easily shift in either direction on subsequent viewings. Until then, here are some other videos that I've made about Imaishi's work and my Patreon where you can access tons of bonus content for even just $1. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.